Perhaps you've heard of Hannibal, the ancient Carthaginian general who became one of the greatest military leaders of all time over 2,000 years ago. Even in the year 2019, it is not uncommon to hear this legendary name come up in discussions, documentaries, and other forms of media. Why is he so popular? He led an army, including his African war elephants, through the treacherous Italian Alps, a vast mountain range that busts out from the earth throughout a large portion of Europe. After defeating the mountains, he then went on to win many battles and gave the ancient Roman Empire, that at the time was still firing on all cylinders, a real scare. In short, he was a real badass mother. This is his story of how he conquered the Alp Mountains, with a little bit of a Godzilla twist. Godzilla Rage Across Time, Issue 4. Let's get to it. "2,234 years ago, a small batch of Roman soldiers are marching through a cave system. Well, mostly marching. They are searching for someone, the great leader Hannibal himself. They believe they are walking into a trap, possibly even being poisoned by the food left over from these warriors. But that's when they realize that this is the least of their worries. Flaming beings in the shape of elephants charge towards the men. This cannot be right. Do their eyes deceive them? Is it actually elephants, or is it something else? In the distance, a silhouette can be seen. This is who the Romans were looking for, Hannibal himself. He then bears witness to the extreme carnage down below. There are few who could watch what was happening and keep a straight face like that of Hannibal. One of the general's men then approaches him, being very clear on how he thinks they are nothing but ants to this beast. Hannibal then replies, "Exactly, we are but ants." Hannibal then goes on to detail how once ants drove a rhinoceros mad. The beast rampaged through the village for a day and night. This is Hannibal's plan. This is what he intends to do with Godzilla. But there's one thing that must first be done. There is no passage through the northern Alps. A path must be created. So Hannibal sits down to think. In the midst of his thoughts, he feels something. He then quickly orders his men to grab the fastest horses and follow him. The beast is still near, but not for long, he yells. Hannibal and his men charge towards Godzilla upon their steeds. Hannibal gallops right underneath Godzilla's tail. He then swings his rope, throwing it upon Godzilla. It somehow manages to stay in place. He then does something unprecedented. He then begins to climb the rope as Godzilla treads forward. Hannibal then tries to ensure that he does not fall off the beast. He stabs his mighty sword deep into the flesh, but then he notices something. The sword didn't go into it, it just broke. With a quick flip of his tail, Hannibal is sent flying to the ground below. His plan was ruined. In the midst of the ashes and corpses that followed the mighty charge towards Godzilla, Hannibal is still left unbroken. He will find a way, no matter what. He will find this northern passage. He then orders his men to call upon the mercenary commanders. "Have them gather with you," he says. "We will do as the ants. We will form an unbreakable column." After meeting up with the mercenaries and marching for quite some time, the mercenary leader states that his men need a rest. They'll hunker down for the night. As the mercenaries sit around a fire, resting and feasting, telling of great war stories, dark figures mass in the shadows. Druids, ancient barbarians, are watching them. They are not fans of the Romans and they are not allies with Hannibal. Suddenly, they burst from the shadows, and with a swift swing of the blade, the mercenary leader's head is chopped straight in two. The mercenaries and warriors call for Hannibal. They need his aid in this battle. Quickly, he emerges from his tent, ready to wage battle. He charges the druid leader and slams into him with his shield, straight into the chest, knocking the air out of the man. But before Hannibal and the wolf warrior could battle, something stops them. You know what it is. The druids are dead, and most of Hannibal's men. The mercenaries are gone as well. But still, Hannibal is unfazed. He will get through the Alps, he will reach the Romans, and he will make them suffer. This is when he comes up with the ultimate plan. I'll let him explain it to you himself.
I will set out and find the beast. While I'm gone, bring the barrels of vinegar to the ravines. Then gather as many dead that'll fit, cover them in tar, and place them in the catapult. I give the beast chase. I will show him our resolve. We will have but a moment. All the men must be ready, especially the archers. When I return, I'll bring the fires of Tartarus behind me.
His plan definitely worked. The giant beast, Godzilla, is not very happy. Amidst this well-devised attack, Godzilla is sent rumbling around through the caves, destroying everything, collapsing the walls, sending boulders flying. All the great leader Hannibal can do is just hang on for dear life. Just as Godzilla eyes down Hannibal, preparing for the killing strike, the rest of his men quickly fire their arrows directly into Godzilla's dorsal plates. Surprisingly, it stuns the giant monster, giving Hannibal just enough time to get out of the way. The same cannot be said for some of his men, though. The barrels of newly created, highly explosive vinegar are then ordered to be set free. As the barrels tumble down, they reach Godzilla's mighty flames, and then set off a reaction of epic proportions. The plan worked. The cave collapses around Godzilla, trapping the mighty monster, at least for now. The explosion caused a pathway in the mountains to be opened. Their northern passage has finally been discovered. As Hannibal and his men march through this opening, they question what price they will have to pay for this victory. But that mattered not. The day had come that all Romans have feared. If only all the Romans had to worry about was Hannibal and his men, though. What's up, residents? Jacob here. I hope you enjoyed that reading of Godzilla Rage Across Time Episode 4. So you know how this works. I'm gonna give you my review of this episode now. So first off, I'm gonna go over the goods from this, at least in my opinion. The first and very most important of these is Godzilla's design. Obviously, that's what you always have to look for in anything Godzilla. And now this design was actually pretty cool. It definitely reminded me of the Heisei era of Godzilla, but something was different. And that, of course, was his dorsal spikes. Instead of having the normal kind of natural, kind of triangular look to them, these almost looked more natural. They looked like stalagmites sticking out from his back, almost like Godzilla was adapting to his cave environment in this issue. On top of Godzilla's design, I also liked the action of this issue. There was some gore, especially that guy getting his head chopped in half. That was pretty sweet. Definitely not kid-friendly, YouTube, remember that. And overall, the pacing of this just felt like it would have made for a good 30-minute TV show sort of deal. I liked that a lot. And another thing positive about this that I think a lot of us have always wanted is we got to see ancient man take on Godzilla. They used catapults, they used arrows, they used flames, they used creative wits. It was really cool to see Godzilla fazed by these ancient weapons. So that was pretty sweet. A different take from the basic tanks and all this that we've seen like 400 times now in Godzilla movies and all that. And lastly, the art style was pretty cool. I liked the background, like I said, I like Godzilla, and I liked a lot of this scenery, the landscape. That was all really cool. And I have some beef with the art style, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. So let's move on over to the negatives about Rage Across Time, Issue 4. My biggest beef with it was that it was kind of hard to follow sometimes, especially when you're looking at the page. I couldn't tell which picture was first in the story, if you know what I mean. Yeah, that's kind of more on me. I'm not the biggest comic reader, so maybe I'm just looking at it wrong as well. So either way, I didn't really like that. Going back to the art style, this is what I didn't like about it. The human faces were goofy as hell. I guess if you're into this, it's definitely an exotic take on it. They definitely weren't trying to be realistic. I guess I could see how you would like it, but to me, I didn't dig it. They looked too weird too weird for me to get into, honestly. And on top of that, it was kind of hard to tell which soldiers were who and what. It kind of looked like Hannibal's men, the Romans, the mercenaries, and the druids. They all kind of looked the same, and I had some struggles kind of figuring out who was who when the story progressed, and it didn't tell you who you were, following at that point. So, I don't know how I feel about that, but I guess there's worse things you could complain about in the end. And lastly, I feel like the ending of the story is kind of rushed. They have this epic confrontation, this epic finale with Godzilla forming the Northern Passage so they can get down to the Roman settlements and all that, and then it's just over. And it's just like, I don't know, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more, but I get the whole point of this story was how Hannibal was able to get through the Alps, so maybe that's just more of a personal beef than anything, but I would have liked for it to have done a little bit more with the ending. So where do I rate Godzilla Rage Across Time Episode 4? I'd give it somewhere along the lines of 7 heads chopped in half out of 10. What do you think, residents? Alright everyone, so we finally made it to the last Rage Across Time, Episode 5, that will come out shortly. Sorry for taking a lot of time to make these. I kind of like to put a lot of effort into them, and amidst everything else going on, sometimes it can be a little difficult, so bear with me on that. I am going to get this issue out to you as soon as I can. And I think you'll like what the topic is on this next one if you're a fan of our channel. So yeah, I hope you all have a good day, and I'll see you next time everyone. Peace out.